Hey, Adam here with Canadian Hobbies. This is kind of a follow-up video of the first impression uh, review of the MTS SN-RC FFV3. If you see in my other videos, I just very recently got the chassis in. It just came in a couple days ago, um, and I gave my first impression of the car right out of the box. Since then, I have torn down the car and I like to kind of show and did a couple mods to it or tweaks to it. I have no idea it's going to work, but we'll find out in the next coming days. Um, I'm going to start off with saying this particular car is I do not recommend anyone who is inexperienced with working on a car and tweaking things and adjusting some fitment. Um, this car hopefully it's gonna be rewarding, um, but I had to do quite a bit of things to this car, and I'm still not fully happy with it. Comparing that to the R3G and the R3 Pro, especially R3 Pro, those two are a much better chassis right out of the box or out of the box from the get-go, much more user-friendly, a lot no issues whatsoever pretty much, except for a couple little strengthening things that can be done, which I mentioned earlier, and you saw in another video of how I had a secondary tie rod to provide more strength for the front knuckles. um, Without further ado, let's get into this and we'll go over what I've done with the vehicle and my impressions as we get along with this video. So um, one thing, I guess I'm going to start here, kind of in the middle here. This has been swapped over to use a shorty lipo and a cross pattern here. I will grab one. So the car, which I did not know, comes with both brackets to do a standard size battery, which has longer carbon fiber brackets, two of them, and shorty. So that's just one thing to know. I had purchased shorty bracket lipo batteries because I just thought it didn't come with it. So keep that in mind. A really cool feature about this is that they actually have two thumb screws. I kind of swapped it out just to have the one thumb screw because I'm only going to take the battery out from one side. But you take out the thumb screw and there's metal hats like you would find on your steering knuckles. And with that little hat, it allows you to actually rotate that, have it tightened down, but rotate that, swing it out of the way. What I've also done is I have a couple pieces of carbon fiber from like a previous car. So you can zoom in, you can see these bracing here, and that's just going to be used to hold the battery down because I'm using actually a very thin, low center of gravity 2-cell LiPo. So that would just slide in like that. I just tighten down the little thumb screw, and the battery will sit just like this. Servo is going to go here, receiver right down, sorry, blocking the camera, right down in this area, like right below the frame or the top rail, and then the speed controller will sit over here. So it should have really good balance right from the get-go. Let's get into issues in the front area. So with the front, one, like I said before, I wish this had the foam bumper just because I'm going to smoke so many boards. We'll see how this holds up. I don't want it to, because this is kind of a little more rigid, but if this takes a hard hit, if it might cause splintering or breaking on the chassis. Hopefully not, but cross that bridge when we get there. The drivetrain is still tight. So I got it significantly looser, and when I put tires on here, it can spin pretty freely, and hopefully as the car is used, the belts will free up more. But the first kind of issue, I'm trying to figure out why I drag a big chunk of the drag was because it has like the gear diff has very thick oil in it from the factory, but it's either overfilled or leaked out or something. But the oil got between the gear casing and like the plastic and then the bushing area, or the plastic bushing and the bearing area. It got in between. I don't know if you can see all this, but it got in between the diff case and this. So you got really thick oil causing a lot of drag there. And also that oil leaked into the bearing as well, or at least felt like it. And the bearing was very difficult to. I just dropped that crud. I'll find it later. The bearing was very difficult to rotate for what a bearing should be. After I took the bearings and pulled off the rubber seals and had it sit in some brake cleaner and just sprayed some WD-40 on it, it freed up the bearing significantly. And after cleaning the diff of excess oil on the outside, that freed a lot of that area up. Majority of the binding or difficulty is still with the belt. The belt, I believe, is a 50 tooth belt, and I'm trying to track down either a 51 or a 52 belt. It's just not common or really hardly used. I tried stretching the belt. I grabbed the belt and I was trying to pull on it a bit, more than a bit. I also had had a rod with a bearing on it, looped the belt around that bearing, and then I had a shaft and a drill, and I kind of just made a loop with that, and I was trying to pull on the belt while I was spinning the drill to kind of rotate the belt to stretch it out. It gave it a little bit more, but not enough. So that said, it's really still pretty tight in the front. I had, if you saw, a small little video I did with the double tie rod, and I saw a little packaging of their kit. I kind of did a cross between what I did before, and I used the kit to do the double tie rod up front. So you can see right here, I have 2 tie rods. There's the double tie rod, and it definitely makes the front end very much stronger, much stiffer. I don't really have so much worry if I smack a board. I don't think I'm really gonna break these knuckles because that's like a weak point from what I read before. So pretty happy there. With the front shock tower, I have to use a stock, the original one. I was hoping to kind of use like a rear or front from a normal touring car, but it just really wouldn't work out too well. Because I was going to put a smaller spur on here, but I didn't have a big enough pinion. Like I have pretty large pinions, and this is actually the size pinion I'm going to be running. Because I'm running a 21.5 turn motor with this car. I was hoping to run a smaller spur, but I just couldn't. I couldn't get the gear ratio to work out. And what was annoying though is that the shock has, 3 positions. I don't know if you can see that. I'll try this camera. There is 3 shock mounted positions, and I moved it to the inside because I have a smaller spur. I'm like, oh, I should fit. Well, there's normally truss head screws or button head screws on the spur here, and those, when I had moved the shock to the innermost position, the heads of the screws were hitting the shock. So I swapped it over to a countersunk screw because I had a lower head profile to clear. It just clears. And then another major thing I had to do after disassembling it, I got a little bit of play, but it's actually not that much. You can see I got a little bit of play. But what I ended up doing is there is this bracket right here. This particular bracket, right in that area, right down there, I actually milled out 20 thou or half a millimeter thickness to bring this bracket closer, because when I was putting it back together, there's no way that C clip would get in there. There's a little C clip there, would get put in there without it actually bending and causing a binding. So this little bracket I machined down a little bit to bring it in closer towards the spur. That way everything would just fit a little freer. So like because of all that in the front, that's really why I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who else has experience with working the cars and not afraid to do some tweaking and modifying it. We'll find out this weekend if it's actually going to be really rewarding car to drive. Just because I have racing this Sunday. Now, you've probably been seeing in a glance, my back end's a little different and a little weird. So, in the pursuit of lower center of gravity and reducing weight, I had thought of before while I was on the way of the car coming to me, doing a rear monoshock. And I kept going back and forth. Is it going to work out? Is it going to be a feasible thing to do? Does it make sense? And I hope so. After the work I put into it, but won't find out. I won't know until I hit the track. So initially I thought, oh yeah, it's gonna work, and then I'm like, oh wait, no, it's not, because if I bring this side up, the whole thing's just gonna pivot and push this side down. And that's what I thought I was gonna do it second time. So I kind of backed out of the idea, and then I kind of went back into okay, I'm gonna try it anyways, and I think it ended up being successful. So I just kind of used a hodgepodge of parts that I had here to make it happen. This is and it's an Exotech shock, but it's for like a Tamiya F104 F1 car. The shock, just because it's a little older, shock is a little longer. So just to have the more travel, because now I need travel for 2 shocks or 2 arms worth, not instead of 1. So I had the Tamiya shock. I had taken the top plastic part that's hooped over, and I drilled a hole instead so I can run a screw. So then I can put on these aluminum standoffs. They're about an inch long, or 26 millimeter long standoffs, and you can see that's on both sides. And then I have just on the very ends of the shocks, I got the little eyelets. I'll try this camera. So you can see the eyelets there. And then what I got going on the back is I got a couple Team CSO cars. They're kind of X-ray knockoff clones. Gonna focus. There it is. And these blue things you see here, like this is from like a version 1 or version 2 Team CSO car, but they're the little blocks that allow you to bolt your arms on. And so I took a pair of these and did a drilled hole where it's supposed to be. That's normally a threaded hole. I drilled it open so it slipped, and I did a couple of machining where I machined down the step. So you can see where it's like a silver part. That's an area where I machined down just to kind of make it fit and rest onto that. And that allowed me to bolt the shock on. So I had the shock bolted on both sides, and then what I did is I got a rear shock tower from one of the CSOs. I grind down a little taps because I only had the 2 in the back, but now this allows me to have a low profile rear body mount. That seems to be the rage lately. But again, that's just dropping the height there. And I took my turnbuckles, I just moved it kind of to the first perch on the rear bulkheads. So there's the rear bulkhead, and I just moved it to the front perch because in the rear you had these pieces on the rear. So just where this hole mounted, that's where I got the rear tie rod connected to. So with the bulkheads, let me see if I can grab a different one. So in the rear, it has like a bulkhead like this, but it's like been modified, like it's been modified specifically for this chassis or the front wheel drive, so I don't know why, because it has still these little notches and stuff like that for rotating the diff. But anyways, you obviously got this nice little channel, curve channel. So I'm like, that is a great spot to fit a shock. So I'm like, you can take this and fit a shock in between that area. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. So you can kind of see in the bulkhead area, the shock rests right in between that. So now the real question is, does this even work? And I think it's going to. One thing I definitely got to commend SN-RC MTS is their sway bars on like the cars that have the carbon fiber arms, because this is their sway bar in the rear. And damn, does it ever work. It works fantastic. This is actually the front sway bar. And in the front, I actually had the rear. So there's that. That's actually the rear. It's a smaller diameter, but it still will. Like I lift this side up. I mean, you can see it's. I know it's hard to see. You can see the other side lifting up as I compress the other side. So that front sway bar is still working. It's actually pulling weight. So now if we look at the rear area with the thicker sway bar as well, if I bring this side up, it is bringing this side up as well. So it's not a case of the suspension just rocking. It's still working that manner. So I'm pushing this side up, and this side's, even the sway bar is actually pulling this side up as well. Now, what's kind of cool, at least by feel, it seems like if I push on this one side alone, it feels, stiff. But when I push on both sides together, it's pretty easy. It's pretty light to move. So it's gonna cool because like it's hopefully gonna be nice and soft in the rear to take bumps and stuff. But when it's cornering and shifting the weight over, it's gonna be stiffer, keeping the car kind of planted. Hopefully, it's again theoretically, it's all theory in my head. But I'm excited to try this. I think it's gonna work pretty well. The whole setup works. You can see it's pretty low profile in the rear. So yeah, it's cool. And then with having the shorty batteries, I was almost kind of thinking the idea of bringing this shock tower down below the bulkhead area. But just looking at the servo mount, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. So from here, where it stands is I'm going to start putting the electronics in and get it ready for racing this weekend. And then from that, I can kind of give you a follow up of how it did on the track. Hopefully, I can get some video on it, but no promises there. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm pretty happy with it all, and it's going to be a cool challenge. And this is Adam from Canadian Hobbies. Thanks for checking my video, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.